Okay.
Post it up
All right. Good evening. We're going to be calling to order the meeting of the Camarillo Planning Commission, regular meeting on this date, Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. If the secretary would call roll, please.
Commissioner Talmadge.
Present.
Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Vice Chair Vandermeulen.
Here.
And Chairman Espinoza.
Here.
And let the record show that Commissioner Edsel is absent.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Talmadge would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance now.
Would you please rise and face the flag and put your hand over your heart? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Talmadge. And moving on, we now at the consent calendar, we have two items, minutes, and one item related to the capital improvement program, which I'm going to ask if we can pull that item and move to discussion to visit that after our public hearing.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to actually rearrange the agenda then to have the pulled consent item heard first.
Okay.
We do have staff in the audience here that can answer your questions.
Okay, that would be fine. So we'll go ahead and move that item to now at this point. Or first, let's go ahead and take action on consent for minutes, if I can get a motion for that.
I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Murphy and seconded by Vice Chair Vandermeulen. All vote. Pass unanimously. Okay, so now discussion item will be the capital improvement 2022 to 2027 capital improvement program, general plan conformity, and coordination review. The reason I asked for this item to be pulled, I just thought in the interest of us having a short agenda this evening that we have the time to spare to just to visit this briefly and have staff give us a general overview of the process of squaring up the capital improvement project program and how they review that process and being consistent with our general plan. If we can have a summary of that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Espinoza. So our senior planner, Paul McClaren, will kind of give a brief overview of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. So, as you're aware, the general plan has got certain elements in it, the circulation element, the land use element, noise element, and other elements within there, transportation element. And what we're doing here is we reach out to our Public Works Department, and they prepare their 5-year capital improvement program, which is the public works projects that will be going on within the city over the next 5 years as they're scheduling them out for just things that have come up that are going to need to be done within the city. We do have 2 members of Public Works here that can ask specific questions about specific projects, if you have them about specific projects. Then, because of this government code, section 65403, which is where this requirement comes from, we also reach out to basically any agency that has utilities or things that could even be considered to be utilities within our public right-of-way and ask them what their capital improvement plan is as well. The intent of that is we're trying to find out all the work that could be going on in the city or near the city that could possibly have an effect on us and our city's capital improvement program. That way, in order to improve the situation where there are impacts, for instance, a road widening, well, if the county is doing some road widening just outside the city wants to know about that so that we can coordinate any work that we may have, which can also result not only in less inconvenience to the public in general, but sometimes there's even the possibility of coordinating it to where you can actually get some cost-sharing benefits out of it. So there's coordination that goes on. So for instance, the agenda report mentions, that we go to the broadband and broadband providers, Spectrum, Frontier. We also reach out to all the water departments. There's multiple municipality or water districts within the city of Camarillo, 4 of them to be precise. And then we also reach out to the county itself to ask about anything that they're doing. And that includes both their road work people as well as their water and sanitation people, and even just their general work that they have to do that doesn't fall under either roads or water. And then we give all of that information. Once we get all of the packets, we give all of that information to the city engineer, and she will then review them and determine which projects actually need coordination. And then that's included in the agenda report here as to what needs coordination. And then when it comes to the actual conformance, what we're looking for is that, we already have a general plan that has a land use, for instance, or traffic or the traffic circulation portion of the general plan. And in the circulation portion, there is a master pedestrian and bicycle plan. And we're looking for, okay, is any of our CIP projects, our capital improvement program projects, are any of them, for instance, related to bike paths, new bike paths within the city? And is that matching up with what is included in the general plan and in the master bicycle program? And we're also looking to see where, for instance, Las Posas Road will be getting bicycle paths in the county. Well, is that where we're going to be tying in? And was that part of our coordination originally? And if not, is it something that we should be coordinating now? So it's really about making sure that the projects that are being put forward are going to match what we've been planning for, that 20-year looking forward general plan, and making sure that it's all going to follow that plan, and if necessary, make adjustments. And then also the work with the county or the other agencies is also following that plan so that we get good coordination.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to turn to my fellow commissioners if there are any questions. Commissioner Talmadge.
Not so much a question, but I think for the information of our viewing audience, hello out there, all of you, however many there are, not many here in the auditorium, but those watching on TV or through the website. I think what's important in the capital improvement program, people see a lot of big dollars for projects, and they wonder, oh my gosh, how are they going to pay for that? And I think a little bit of background information is appropriate. The city has a number of funds that they use for capital projects. There, of course, is the general fund, which receives monies from different opportunities within the community. But another big source of funds, and one that we see in the desalter plant, are grants, where we get grants from either state or federal agencies that help subsidize the cost of a project. And I think that's very important because it's a lot of staff work that goes on behind the scenes that none of us ever see, but all of a sudden, the grants are written, made their presentations, discussions have occurred, and then comes money from various federal and state and local programs. And we see the big example, like I mentioned, is the desalter plant, but other funds come from other local agencies, such as the Metropolitan Water District, Callegas Water District for water projects, and others. Another source are direct assessments that are made in very particular instances for a particular project. Some of these take the form of money that's accrued from developer fees. We see this in the Didzar Park development, which is consistent with the general plan of creating open space and recreation opportunities for the citizens of the community. And you use these assessments and these developer fees to help support building these projects. We also see developer fees used for many improvements to our traffic system within the city, of various road improvements, freeway interchanges, traffic lights and whatnot. So these are projects that are, in a way, or in a sense, paid for by someone else. The city also has the opportunity to use bonding measures to provide funds, and the source of it could be revenue bonds or things like that. So it's not like, okay, prices are going to rise in Camarillo because there's a big capital improvement plan. No, there's a lot of other pieces to this puzzle that funds these projects. One of the big things I was looking at in the capital improvement plan is we hear a lot about we're in a serious drought. Well, what are we doing for water conservation? And of course, the first answer that comes up is the desal plant, which was just recently completed, and they're still working on it as we speak, final fine-tuning of the program. But that provides an alternate source of water for the city and its residents, something that doesn't come from either the Colorado River, which we get very little of that, but the State Water Project, which comes from Northern California. And that we get a lot of, wheeled through various other agencies, but it does come to the city and provide a means of potable water for our citizens. The other things are, you'll find it buried as you look within the water facilities, but there's a large recycled water storage facility. And where that comes from and why that's important in water conservation is, as you move water through the wastewater treatment system, you can produce water that can be used for irrigation. And that irrigation water is potable water you don't have to put on the ground. It's already recycled water that can be used for other purposes, specifically landscaping. But it does shave the need for potable water or imported water or even local well water. There's a lot of work identified on various wells around the city. A number of our agencies, not only within the city, but other private water companies within the city or next to the city, such as Camarillo, Pleasant Valley, and others, their sole source of water are wells. And in Camarillo, they get imported state water and well water. But the point is that money is being invested in making these kinds of facility improvements to the water system. In the out years, there's standby power. As many of you, I'm sure, recognize, when the power goes off, it goes off. And it's out, and a lot of things negatively can happen as a result. By having emergency power available at pumping stations, lift stations, things like that, you keep that water flowing and you keep people in water. So it's important that we look. Then standby power in the out years is between $24 and $25 million in that. And that's all an investment in our future. And that goes directly to our general plan of providing the livable community we all want to be in. Another one that doesn't get mentioned much is storm drainage. Having adequate facilities to take, when we do get a heavy rainstorm, that we don't flood, cause damage, cause people to lose power, cause people to leave their homes. I've seen that happen numerous times in my time here in Camarillo. But having a viable storm drainage system is vital, and it's important to all of our citizens. Within the roads part of the capital improvement, the city has, I think, a very effective means of pavement maintenance, where there's a regular amount of money every year spent on either slurry seals or repairs to surface roads within the community. And it kind of rotates around. It doesn't follow from east to west or west to east. It goes around based on conditions. And you'll always see signs up that say, road under improvement. Well, that's good, because they are getting improved. And then there's other traffic improvements that do come about, either paid for by developer money or paid for by the city. Installation of traffic lights and whatnot. We see this happening in the Springville area, where there's a lot of new development that's coming. Well, that's caused new roads to be built and caused new signals to be installed and whatnot. So when we look at the capital improvement plan, it's really important to see the kinds of projects and why they are being done and where the money is coming from. Because all of this supports us in the city, and I think is vitally important. And I think what we have presented here does, in fact, the question that we look at and answer is it consistent with the general plan of the city? And in my opinion, the answer is yes, because we have a lot of projects that are identified that do support a livable community, support the kinds of things that our people have said are important to us. So I wanted to take the opportunity. It sounds like it's not a campaign speech or anything like that, but just to provide a little bit of, I think, additional information for our public so they understand a little bit about what all these big numbers mean and what are we really doing and why are we doing that? Well, there's all good reasons for it. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say something.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Very thorough. Should give the public an indication of just the magnitude of city government in all respects. Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, I want to echo the thank you for allowing us to, or affecting this discussion. I think there's a lot out there. I appreciated the summary from Mr. McClaren. Thank you very much on what a CIP five-year program is. I appreciate the summary by Commissioner Talmadge on basically where the money goes to and the benefits that the city and the community derive from that. I do have a question about the numbers, and I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but I noticed that there, in the past five-year CIP programs, the city has had a $30 million approximately allocation for compliance with state water, stormwater quality programs, and there was not actually designated projects for it, but there was a $30 million, somewhere around there, allocation for that. So has that no longer necessary? Is that allocation something that's not required anymore?
Commissioners, Chairman, Vice Chairman, let me just open up the five-year CIP quickly just to make sure I'm referencing the project that you mentioned.
Yeah, so it's not in the current one, and I don't have the past ones, but it was a big dollar item, and I remember it over the years, kind of looking at that and wondering what it was from a substance.
We currently have a project titled Municipal Stormwater NPDES Permit Compliance.
Okay.
It's on page D as in dog 05 in the storm drainage section. And I believe I know what you're referring to in past CIPs, but it was generally related to this same item where we had allocated, we have a 5-year window that we associate with our 5-year CIP, and then for potential projects where we want to make a designation that there could possibly be work and to put a ballpark estimate in that, we have a column titled Future, which is 6 to 20 years out. Not saying we're obligated to doing that, but just as a kind of like a heads up item of the potential. So we have $32 million in that future column for NPDES permit compliance related to the stormwater management program that the city is required to develop in coordination with the county and other agencies to be in compliance with permits. So that's something that's a placeholder for the future, and it's just a ballpark estimate that's in there. And so at this time, that particular project has $100,000 in year 2 of the CIP, which is in fiscal years 23 to 24, for just potential studies related to the impacts of that particular project. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, that's very helpful. It sounds as though it's been pushed out to year 6 and beyond. And the 100,000, I guess, is part of what will be invested in determining if and when that allocation would be required. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Vice Chairman, yeah.
Thank you. And I just have a couple questions, just to kind of help me understand how the money flows and tracks and such. And I didn't write down the pages these are on, so I hope you don't need them. But just for examples, when it listed Disdar Park and it listed 4 million plus in the 21-22 year, which is this year, but as far as I know, we haven't really done much other than spend the money for the planning for that. So does that track over then through the next years until it's needed? Or how does that work on the accounting for that?
That's correct. So for that particular project, you'll see in what we call current, which is the current fiscal year, those funds identified that are already in the city's budget will then roll over. The unused funds will then roll. So what we do in the CIP is if we need additional funds or due to increased estimates, we put those additional estimates in years 1 through 5, and those monies will be appropriated. Year 1 monies will be appropriated when the budget is adopted to
Okay.
ensure sufficient funding for the project.
Okay. Yeah, I know, especially with COVID and such, everything got behind in planning and working and processing. So the other one that I wrote down was, caught my eye because it's an intersection that has had a lot of questions to as far as the southbound Santa Rosa Road, Pleasant Valley intersection, where it calls for widening that, but it says, it was something about, and I just wrote down sketchy notes, that there was money available from a cash out from something, but we don't have it listed until year 25, 26. So how does it, I'm not sure that I understand the cash out from something, and then how does that carry over as far as later years?
Right. I believe you're referring to the Pleasant Valley Road southbound off-ramp improvements?
Yes.
You're right. There is a reference in here in the description. The city received developer cash-out funds for a certain track development. So what we've done with this project is we've moved the scheduling of this project in the outer years so that it allows us time to coordinate with VCTC's US 101 improvement project, because the scope of their project encompasses from Highway 23 to 33 along the US 101 corridor, which would affect this project. And so we've shown this as a project to show our intended use of those developer funds, but move the schedule out knowing that we needed to
match.
coordinate with that VCTC project.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of, as I go through and look at these numbers and where they're placed, be able to understand how they work through the system. And then my other question just came up when, on the 20-year plan, is the 20 years a set 20 years, or does it move as, like the 5-year plans move to the next 5 years, or is it a set 20 years?
It's not set 20 years. It's the more important window is the 5-year window of the CIP, and in the future, the 6 to 20 years. That's usually something that's updated and looked at every year.
Okay.
But it is a little bit more static, and because those are potential projects that that we're kind of placing there as a placeholder. And so the projects that are more certain, for example, some of the projects in the sanitary section have future year funds shown. Those ones are a little bit more certain. So as those projects get nearer, those funds will then be reflected in the 5-year window when they get closer.
Okay,
And some projects don't change much year to year because there hasn't been additional information, so it's kind of a mixed bag there.
I did recognize a lot of the projects from prior years, so that's all I had, so thank you very much.
Vice Chair, just to add to that, I think also part of your question, when it comes to the 20 years, is that the general plan does have a planning horizon that's typically about 20 to 30 years out. In Camarillo, the way we tend to do that, though, is we update elements at a time rather than the entire general plan at once. So,
Okay.
for instance, we're working on, we just did the housing element, and with the housing element, then there's a statutory requirement now for the safety element. And then there will possibly be, I don't know if it's going to be maybe the land use element or another one of the open space or the open space and conservation element are possibly the ones we're going to be updating after that. But it's generally a cycle of how we update our general plan and always looking forward to a planning horizon of about 20 years out.
Okay, so it does fluctuate as it goes?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
All right, a quick question I had was on the government code and the effort to reach out to other entities to see whether or not their CIPs will be consistent as well with our general plan. Since this is an annual review process that takes place, they don't necessarily have to submit to you a 5-year plan per se. It can just be a single year since there'll be another review the following year. Is that correct?
We always ask them for a 5-year plan, but based on their particular internal organization, they may not have that 5-year plan prepared. We are asking them certainly for a 5-year plan, but sometimes, we don't get everything that we ask for, and so we kind of have to make do with what we do get. But we do definitely always want at least a year out so that we can at least coordinate those immediate projects that are on our next cycle yearly, or our next year, so that the coordination can happen. We are slowly but surely realizing that there will be a necessity to start this process maybe a little earlier on with all these entities. Next year, I intend to have a meeting with them all in mid-February and trying to just give them a little bit of heads up about what we really are looking for so we can try to improve upon this and even get a better coordination going forward.
Right. Yeah, I did notice the variation between, it seems like you got almost all full compliance with all the entities you reached out to, but there definitely was a variation in terms of what they gave you and what they offered, and might make it a little challenging for you to review that on a 5-year basis. But I have to say that the city's CIP program was head and shoulders above everything I saw, so
Yeah, they've
I
done an
commend
excellent
this-
job.
Yeah, I commend them for that, yeah. Then the other thing did want to ask a question about infrastructure related to a couple of items. One was they were supply lines. It sounded like water lines related to Caigas, and one was to tie into Ventura, and one was to run a line to Hill of Santa Rosa Road. One's a 36-inch main, one's a 24-inch main. When you do something, a large infrastructure project like that might impact the city, and it's another government entity that's actually going to do that type of project. Are they required, I was just kind of curious what the process is for them to be carrying out something, a large project that might impact traffic, might impact other things, and trying to put in infrastructure like that with the city.
Sure, I can answer that in general. I'm familiar with the one that is proposed to connect near the dog park. That will be the intertie between Caigas with their potable water tank on the hill, sending it over to Ventura. Not as familiar with the other one on the other side of the city, but in general, with other agencies, with a project that large, the public would be engaged either in an outreach process or an environmental review process And for example, we were aware of the pipeline, the intertie on the west side of the city near the dog park heading towards Ventura through the environmental review process, and we did review and comment on that as part of that process. So the public has the same opportunity to do that for those larger type projects.
Okay, great, thank you. And that's all I have on that. So I appreciate very much the presentation and the questions being answered. I think that's good for not only our education information, but also for the public who may be listening in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, we will now open up for public comments. This is the period for anybody who might wish to address the... Okay. Oh, for this item or receive?
Wait, are you talking about public comments on the, are you talking about public comments on the capital improvement?
No, no, no.
Or you need to approve, you need to recommend?
Okay. So we'll make a motion to receive and file. Okay, can we get a motion for that? Or make a recommendation to the council?
So move.
Okay. Have a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Talmadge, seconded by Commissioner Murphy to recommend to the council the CIP. Vote, please. Okay, that's unanimous. There we go. Okay, now, for this public comment period, for anything not on the agenda, if there's any member of the public who wishes to, no cards, okay. So with that, we will close the public comment period and move on to public hearing. And this will be for ordinance to amend and restate Camarillo Municipal Code, Chapter 1956.56, accessory dwelling units, adopt resolution recommending approval to the city council. And if we can have a staff report on this side.
Thank you, Chairman Espinoza, Planning Commission. So just provide a little bit of background. This whole process started back in 2019 when the state went ahead and passed 19 housing-related bills pretty much all at once. And a handful of them, I think approximately like 5, were related specifically to ADU regulations, and the ones on the screen here that were kind of the 3 big ones that really are prompting us to change our ADU ordinance. So, like I said, the whole process started in 2019 and it became effective January 1st, 2020. The staff worked with the city attorney's office to prepare the draft ordinance and kind of embark on this journey, which includes basically going to a study session with the city council, planning commission, and then final approval by the city council. And the last step is to submit the ordinance to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, for their formal review to make sure that we're consistent with state law. So knowing that we're going to be going through a fairly large process to draft this ordinance, the state offered kind of like a cursory review, high-level review of our draft ordinance before we embarked on this process. So we took them up on that, and they reviewed our ordinance, and they had some minor suggestions, and we incorporated that, and then we started going through the hearings to amend our ordinance. In May in 2020, the Planning Commission considered it and recommended approval to the City Council, and then the City Council, a few weeks later, May in 2020, reviewed it and adopted it and directed staff to send the ordinance to HCD for their formal review. So a little over a year after we submitted the ordinance, we did hear back from the state, and they said that overall the ordinance was consistent except for 2 items. The 2 items are listed on the screen, but just kind of give you a little bit more background, because we actually had a conference, a phone conference with HCD on this, and kind of push back a little bit. So what they're requiring us to do is to basically, instead of listing all the zones where ADUs would be allowed, They want us to just say that ADUs are allowed in any district where single-family or multifamily dwellings are permitted. And we asked why can't we do it our way, and just list all the zones? And they kind of came back with an answer that made sense. They said, well, what if you create a new zone or, district? Then you'd have to go back and amend this ordinance to just say it's allowed in all of them. So that made sense. So we incorporated that. The other one is the property owner certification on an annual basis. So just kind of give you a little bit more background on that. So state law allows the city to record a covenant saying if the property owner wants to do a junior ADU, which is basically carved out of the existing footprint of the house, that we can require the property owner live in either the junior ADU or the primary residence. So we took it one step further and said, yes, we're going to be consistent with state law and have you guys have this covenant, but we also want you to certify annually that you live there, to make sure that we have a property owner on there, thinking that they would take better care of the property. So the state came back and said, no, that is way beyond the scope of the intent of the law, and it's burdensome, and you can't do it. So we have to remove that, the annual certification. We can keep the covenant requiring it to be, basically owner-occupied, one of the units. But we had to remove the annual certification of the homeowner. So really, those were the only two comments that they're requiring us to make on the ordinance. We've incorporated that. We also, so you can kind of see exactly where the changes were made, we printed out those copies in red line and handed them out earlier. Yeah, you're welcome. So just to kind of make it, stand out a little bit more and how we incorporated that. So, and then with this action, we kind of went, belt and suspenders on this one, and we identified, I think, 4 CEQA exemptions here. So we determined it is exempt from the CEQA review based on the sections here that we cite. Oops. And then the suggested action is to adopt a resolution recommending approval to the City Council of the proposed ordinance amending and restating Chapter 19.56, the Camarillo Municipal Code. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for that report and the explanations. Questions of Commission?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the red line version. After, reading through a couple days online and everything's just as it's corrected. And I was driving over tonight and thinking, wish I had a red line version so I could see exactly what was taken out from where. So I'm glad to have that. The changes that that they're requesting, I can understand why they requested them. They're very minor, actually, other than, excuse me, I would have liked to even had the junior ADU recorded as far as something, that it was being used or something even more definite than what we asked for, but it does make sense, so I don't have really any questions or concerns with what they've requested. I was just noticing, my only question was, since the letter to us was dated a year ago, almost, I didn't know offhand what took place, that extended this out a year to where we're getting it now, but conversations kind of explained that. Yeah. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Talmadge.
Just a matter of clarification on the second part, which is actually subparagraph E under Section 1956.030 JADU Development Standards. Is the JADU, is it proposed in here that that person own that unit, or does ownership remain with the owner of the property? In other words, the JADU is occupied by a renter.
Yes, that's correct. One of the units, either the junior ADU, the JADU, or the primary resident, needs to be occupied by the property owner. Therefore, the other one would be rented out.
Okay, so if the primary unit sells, how does that affect the ADU?
Well, it doesn't. It's still a legal, residence. And, if there's, the new owner would have to honor any kind of lease agreement that they have with the tenant in the JADU.
Is there any requirement that call it a rent control, if you may, on the JADU by the owner, a new owner, upon purchase of the property? Does the rent stay the same, or is it a open new negotiation?
The new owner would have to honor any existing contract with the,
Okay, so it's in a sense like rent control, that,
well, it's an agreement. It's,
Okay.
It's not like a city-governed rent control program.
so the provisions for the JADU carry forward if the main property is sold to another person or another individual?
I guess, can you clarify, what do you mean by provisions of the JADU? Because
Okay.
it's, the junior ADU has already been established as a residence, a place where people can, occupy. So that's created, you'd have to, if they wanted to remove it, there'd actually be like a permit process to go through and remove it, if that answers your question.
Okay. So essentially what you've done is just create the existence of a JADU, and then the other agreements just go with the land, so to speak, and don't really change. In other words,
The lease, the other agreements would be a lease.
yeah, the agreement that's between the JADU and the current owner remain the same with a new owner.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Just if I could put something that maybe will clarify it, when the JADUs can't be sold separately, so they're still part of the parcel, and if a new owner took over, they would probably have to honor the existing lease for the length of that lease, but they have the right to then turn it back into their property if they want to. There's nothing that's recorded that I know of that says it has to remain a JADU once it's created. So it's just kind of flexible, as far as I know, unless you have other information that,
No, you're correct.
okay.
Okay.
And they would also, if the lease expired, they would also have the ability to renegotiate the lease, correct? So,
Correct.
Just like any landlord.
Okay.
Right.
Commissioner Murphy?
Thank you, Chair. So on the same section that we were just talking about, the JADU deed restrictions, the three items, the first one is prohibit the sale of the JADU separate from the sale of the single-family residence. Can a JADU be separate from the house? Are those allowed, or do JADUs have to be within the house?
That'd be within the house, the footprint of the house. Yeah. But
Oh.
they can have access to the interior of the house,
Right,
or they can have their own separate entrance.
okay,
Right.
got it. Because in the case of an ADU, they would be able to subdivide the property into two lots and then sell the ADU separate from the main residences. Is that correct?
There's one instance where they can do that, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And that's for affordable housing purposes.
Okay, that makes sense. And I thought I had something else here. Oh, okay. For the, you mentioned that you had run this verbiage by the state in a phone call, and were they in agreement with the section E here, these deed restrictions?
Yes, this is their language that we sent, that they said that we have to incorporate into our ordinance.
All right, so
Or remove from our ordinance, I should say. On this one is removing it.
Got it. So they're okay with requiring owner occupancy of either the JADU
Yes.
or
Yeah,
or
that's
the main
actually in state law.
resident? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
That we have the ability to do that.
Okay, it's just a matter of removing the annual reporting requirement. It kind of switches it from
Yes.
having to communicate to the city that they're in compliance every year with going to the honor code, essentially, the property owners. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Commissioner Murphy touched on, one of the things I wanted to ask was the confidence level in terms of, I mean, it was all reviewed before they had outlined at the outset exactly what expectations were in order to be compliant with the new laws. And as we've kind of been discussing here, it's actually complex and confusing. So I wanted to get a feel for just what the confidence level is this time around in terms of when we act to pass this, submit this, that there's no more bounce back of any kind where they say we want one more thing done.
99%.
Okay.
There's always the one, you know, they're also for a loop. But they're the HCD is basically saying that if you do this, you're in conformance with state law.
Okay. Very good. That's all I have.
And I put in one more possible clarification, but I would like clarification in case something's changed. But on the JADUs, if I remember right, because I haven't looked at it for a while, they're required to have a kitchen facility and cooking facility. They don't have to have a bathroom facility. They can use the bathroom of the main house if they don't have one in the JADU. Is that still?
I think you're correct.
Yeah, that's
Because-
correct.
Yeah, so they can have an entrance from the outside, or an entrance to the inside of the main house, and they may or may not be sharing the bathroom with the main house facilities. They are required to have a kitchen, and I thought one other thing, closets or something in there. But it has some flexibility as to who's renting it, how much they rent out, and how separate it is. But it does still have to be in the footprint of the main house.
Yeah, so I just looked it up. It's letter G under
Okay.
sanitation here. So, yeah, they can share the facilities, but if they don't have access, they obviously have to have their own.
Right. So I didn't know if that would make any more sense to, when you're asking about basically where the junior ADU goes and fits in.
Yes, that is helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions from the commission, if we can have a reading of the resolution.
Resolution number PC 2022-7, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo recommending approval to the City Council of an ordinance amending and restating Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units.
And I'll move to await further reading and move to adoption.
Okay, it's been moved by,
Second.
it's been moved by Vice Chair Vandermeulen and seconded by Commissioner Murphy. Please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving on. In our agenda, any thing with director's report? Oh, correct. My apologies. So we are going to backtrack for a minute and open public hearing on this item after our discussion with commissioners prior to the reading of the resolution. There are no cards, so we're closing the public hearing. And so we've taken care of that formally. Now, do we need to revisit the reading and the voting?
I don't think you do, because you already did it. I mean, if you want to do it again, that's fine, just belt and suspenders. That's fine, if you want to redo it. Yeah, I don't think you have to. I think we're fine.
Okay,
Because there was just no public comment.
right. Okay. Then with that, with the original motions and seconds and vote stands. Okay, moving on to director's report.
Yes, so I have one item. So as we're looking at our next couple of months here for our items that we're going to be bringing to the Planning Commission for consideration, the way it's tracking right now, I just kind of want to give you guys kind of a heads up. Our next regular scheduled meeting will most likely be June 14th, unless something else happens. But right now, we're tracking with our items for June 14th.
Okay. And nothing else? Okay, any commissioner comments? No comments? With that, we'll adjourn meeting.